The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Senator Scott Surovell with us this morning. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Woody. How you doing?
Good. And you, 45-day quick session, lots of things moving, however.
Yeah, it's like riding a rocket.
Tell us a little bit about the makeup of the Senate. It's still 21-19 Republican to Democrat, correct?
Right, yeah, we've actually had about, I think, 4 or 5 special elections since the last time we were here in Richmond. But we've had some changes, but no changes in party control in any seats. So it's still 21 Republicans, 19 Democrats, and a Democratic lieutenant governor.
I guess a couple of those changes are due to elections to Congress, are they not?
Right, yeah, Senator Tom Garrett got elected to Congress. Senator Don McEachin got elected to Congress. And we had, I think, one death, and I'm trying to remember who else left us. We had one other change, and I can't remember why right now, but yeah, we had a few people move up to Congress. It's good to see Don move up.
Yeah.
He's going to be an excellent congressman.
Good. And I understand today committee assignments will be made, but you're unlikely to change the ones you're currently on.
Yeah, there are going to be some shifts in committees because of the resignations and the movement, but we'll see. I might get 1 or 2 changes, but I'm not expecting to get a 4th committee or anything like that. So they have to put all the new members in spots too, so we'll see what happens.
So if you had your druthers, what change would you make?
Actually, the committees I'm on right now are much better than the committees I had on when I was in the House of Delegates, and I'm pretty happy with the committees I have. Obviously, everybody wants to be on finance. That's where the budget decisions are made. That's a huge deal. That's mainly a seniority issue, though, and I'm one of the newest members, so getting on the finance being here for 1 year would be kind of a big deal if it happened, but very unlikely. What I do for a living is I'm a lawyer, and I go to court every day, and so being on the courts committee I think would be a good use of my time. But again, courts committee is a committee that everybody wants to be on, and
Right.
not having seniority, there's a line.
Sure.
So that's not a bad one either. But we'll see what happens. I mean, right now I'm on rehabilitation and social services, the general laws and technology committee, and the local government committee. And again, all 3 of those are better than the 3 I was on when I was in the House. So.
Good. Now, you were present when the governor gave his State of the State remarks last Wednesday. Any surprises there?
No, I think the governor sort of reminded people about everything that he'd accomplished. He's actually done a lot when it comes to economic development and bringing jobs into Virginia. I think $15 billion, I want to say, of outside investment he's brought into this state. Announced a new 1,400 job facility out in Winchester. His restoration of voting rights, I think, was a very historic decision he made. He announced a couple new policy initiatives. I should say he adopted a couple new policy initiatives that we've been fighting for the last 5 years or so. But I didn't hear anything tremendously groundbreaking. But it's it's the last year of his term in office, and in Virginia we have these one-term governors, and so they're kind of limited. And this is the last year of his term, his last session. So.
Turning for a moment to your district, we were talking a little bit earlier about Route 1 and the development there. What's going on?
Yeah, so I represent basically the whole Route 1 corridor, all the way from around the Woodrow Wilson Bridge all the way down to just north of Fredericksburg. And the problems on Route 1 are pretty similar the entire length. And up in the Fairfax County portion of the Route 1, we're basically starting to plan out the construction of a median dedicated bus rapid transit and a 2-stop extension of the metro to happen over the next 10 to 20 years. And the amount of housing density that's necessary to support that is tremendous. We're going to have to bring another 80,000 people to live on top of where 40,000.
80,000, wow.
To live on top of where 40,000 live.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea, $80,000 is one House of Delegates seat. It's a lot of people, right? And so right now there's only one delegate that represents that area. We're going to take basically double the population, but it's all going to go up in the air. And so in 20 years, the Route 1 corridor from Huntington all the way to Fort Belvoir is going to look a lot more like the Arlington Metro corridor in terms of the type of housing you see. And then when you get south of that, all the growth at Fort Belvoir is driving a lot of change down there. And this bus rapid transit system is going to extend all the way down to the Woodbridge VRE. And at Woodbridge, you have a brand new, I think, 600-unit condominium going in overlooking the Occoquan River. Supervisor Principe down there told me he has 4 big multifamily projects planned around the Woodbridge VRE station. Prince William County is currently sort of halfway through widening Route 1 to 6 lanes the entire way through the county, and that's doing a lot to clean up that corridor, take down a lot of the businesses and old buildings that have been there, and it's going to have a whole new look and feel, and I think you're going to see a lot more investment in that part of Prince William County too over the next 20 years. Not as much transit as I'd like to see. You know, transit takes a lot of local government funding, and the Prince William County government is not quite as focused on transit as much as Fairfax County is. But you're going to see a lot of change in that whole I-95 Route 1 corridor over the next 20 years. I mean, you have 4,000 houses actually going in at Potomac Shores, which is sort of right between Dumfries and Woodbridge. And 4,000 houses, when you think about how many people that is.
So
And a brand new VRE station they're building there. It's going to open in 2018. But there's a lot of change up and down the corridor.
of course, that's kind of interesting because I remember last year there was a little bit of controversy around a bill that amended the proffer requirements that
Right.
local governments impose, and some people suggested it was more in favor of the developers than constituents, if you will. And of course, it's being implemented now. How do you see that all working out?
Well, with the proffer system, you know, the proffer system was originally designed to allow developers to fund some of the infrastructure that was being made necessary by their development. And the problem is that system was being abused in a lot of ways. Number one, you had local governments dictating like countertops and roofing shingles and siding on houses instead of asking builders to contribute towards infrastructure. And then in some jurisdictions, specifically Prince William and Stafford, among others, they were doing this sort of per house fee they were making people pay. So if you built a house in Prince William County, you had to pay an extra like $50,000 of cash to the county per house, or per townhouse it was less, per condo it was less. But it was basically, from my perspective, it was a tax on new families. They weren't taking that money and putting it into an intersection or a specific school. The Board of Supervisors, which we could take that money that people in the southern part of the county were paying and put it towards a school in the northern part of the county. And there's just a big disconnect. And so, you know, I think the passes we changed said that if you're going to require a proffer, it has to be specifically directed to an improvement, which is right there on that housing development. But also, we also created an exception for basically the entire Route 1 corridor in Fairfax County and actually northern Prince William, because it also says that the changes we made to the law do not apply to any area that's served by transit and where the buildings are a certain height or higher. And that basically applies to the Woodbridge area and basically everything from Fort Belvoir north. And so the changes we made shouldn't affect any of the development in there.
Good. Now, there are a lot of environmental issues you're involved with, especially in terms of raw sewage discharge in Alexandria.
Right. Yeah, you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but Alexandria had this state-of-the-art sewer built in 1890, which basically takes all the water from people's toilets and combines it with water on the street and throws it right into the Potomac River. And there's about 800 of these around the country. They're called combined sewer operations, or CSOs. And Alexandria, from my point of view, has been kind of slow about taking steps to take care of this. EPA about 10 years ago started to order a lot of these localities, or actually states, to make their localities bring their systems into compliance, to get that raw sewage out of the Potomac River, out of our streams and creeks and everything else. And Alexandria came out with a plan about 6 months ago to solve about half their problem. But they have one pipe that puts about 70 million gallons of raw sewage into the Potomac every year that, from my point of view, they don't have any plan to solve. And they've proposed to solve it in about 30 or 40 years. They just want to study it for another 15 and then make a decision in the future. And that's unacceptable to me. I mean, I basically represent everybody who's downstream of that. And you know, I don't think in the United States of America we put raw sewage in our rivers anymore. We should tolerate that. I mean, that's a third world country kind of thing. And so I have legislation this year which would require Alexandria to fix it within 10. My bill was actually taken up by the chairman of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee and put into his bill. And he put an even stricter timeline on that. And that bill's now moving through the process, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth negotiation about it. You're probably going to keep hearing about that over the next month, but I think at the end of the year, you're probably going to see a bill come down that says Alexandria has to fix the entire raw sewage problem within probably the next 10 to 15 years is my guess.
Is the city opposed to it, and if so, what are the reasons?
The city doesn't like the General Assembly telling them what to do, and they would prefer we just leave them alone and let them do it in their own time frame. So they oppose it in that sense. They say they want to solve the problem. They would prefer that we just let redevelopment occur and development take care of the problem. As a new building comes up, they connect it to a sewer or something instead of, making them solve it. The real issue is that it's a very expensive and difficult engineering problem, because you have to basically take a massive tunnel or basically something the size of a high school gymnasium and bury it to store all this sewage and water until they can get it through their systems after there's a storm. And I think they can engineer design something, and within the next 10 or 15 years. Alexandria is a very wealthy jurisdiction compared to other parts of Virginia, and I think they have the resources to fund it. That's another problem. I mean, Alexandria has some other funding priorities like a metro station and some schools and things, but I think this just needs to be a huge priority for them, and that's kind of what this is all about. It's just trying to get them to reprioritize some of their spending.
So you have they have to balance those spending needs against the health concerns, obviously.
Yeah, the health concerns and the other needs of the folks of Alexandria, but Alexandria's property tax rate is 4% beneath Fairfax County's property tax rate. They have all kinds of taxing authority that we don't have in Fairfax County. Their sewer authority can always raise rates. I mean, they have lots of different tools at their disposal to raise the money necessary to do this. And when you bond a project like this off over 20 years, it's not a huge amount of money.
And interest rates are low now. I assume they have a good bond rating down in the city of Alexandria?
They do now. They're telling us that if we put this, we
It's
drop this big bill on them, they're worried about it. But yeah, they've got an excellent bond rating right now. I mean, it's a pretty well-managed city. I mean, in general, I don't quibble with what the Alexandria City Council does. I mean, I think in general they do a good job. But I just feel like on this one, they just need to speed this up some. And it's easy to put raw sewage in the river and just let the people downstream deal with it. And
Right.
that's not fair to me.
A similar issue is coal ash.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, water quality seems to be a big issue for me lately. In southern Prince William County, in the Dumfries area, there's a huge Dominion power plant, and it's been there since the 1940s. And from I guess the 40s until about early 2000, they used to create power by burning coal there. And of course, when you burn coal, you have coal ash that's left over, and you got to do something with it. And historically, they would take it and just throw it in a pond, because if you put it in a pond, it wouldn't blow around and get in the air. And about 4 years ago, the EPA said that we're not allowed to keep it in ponds anymore because pond dams break and the stuff gets out. There's been some Superfund site cleanups and some really big problems. But the biggest problem in the Prince William site, Possum Point site, that's what we call it, is Possum Point, because the piece of land looks like a possum's head. This coal ash leaks out heavy metals, things like boron, hexavalent chromium, lead, chromium, and it leaches out and gets into the groundwater. And there's a ring of monitoring wells around, but a couple of them had failed. The ones that were closest to people's homes had failed, actually. And over the summer, I banged on DEQ and said, we got to get these wells open again so we know what's going on underground before we approve any final plans.
DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality.
Yeah, the Department of Environmental Quality right now is trying to decide whether to let Dominion store the stuff there forever. Dominion wants to put a rubber top on it with some dirt and just let it sit there and just monitor. And I didn't feel comfortable doing that until we had good data for what was coming out of the wells. And so DEQ ordered them to re-drill the wells nearest homes. They drilled the wells and found out the stuff was leaching out into people's drinking water in their wells in their homes. And about a month ago, Dominion offered to hook them all up to county water access at $40,000 per house because of the testing data that came back from those wells. And actually on January 26th, there's going to be a public information session in Woodbridge where DEQ is going to talk about the permanent storage plan for that facility. And a lot of people are going to show up because a lot of people are really unhappy about it. I would like to see them dig it up and haul it away, among other things. But the Department of Environmental Quality is not ready to do that. I also have another bill this year that would require Dominion to recycle a certain amount of that coal ash every year and then sell it to Virginia concrete companies. Most people don't realize this, but you actually use concrete or coal ash in making concrete. And actually, last year, Virginia imported 600 cargo containers full of coal ash from China into Virginia, even though we have millions and millions and millions of cubic yards of this stuff sitting around in our ponds, polluting our water, just sitting there. We still import it from other countries to use to make concrete because the stuff in the ground's all full of water and you can't use it unless you recycle it. And so my bill would require them to recycle it and then sell it so we can start using that stuff in the ground, getting it out of the ground and making some jobs and using it to make concrete. And so I'm hopeful that bill might have a chance this year.
Great. Hands-free digital devices, use while driving, that's something you've been involved in for some time, but you have another piece of legislation in right now.
Yeah, you know, you talk to anybody who drives a car, and they'll tell you, you know, all you got to do is look to the side, and odds are about every other car you see, somebody's going to have their phone in their hand as they're trying to drive their car. And, you know, I think this has just really become an epidemic in our country. About 5 years ago, I was hired as an attorney to represent a family for a kid named Kyle Rowley. Kyle was 18 years old. He was a college student, freshman college student. He was working at a burger joint out in Herndon. And as most college kids are, he didn't have a lot of money, and his car ran out of gas on the way home on Route 7. Pulled his car over to the shoulder in Western Fairfax. Pulled his car to the shoulder, turned on his blinkers, and he was pushing his car off the road. He was about 10 yards from a stoplight when he was struck from behind by a guy who had 1,000 feet of clear road to see him. No other cars around, 1,000 feet of clear road, and hit him at full speed without braking and killed him instantly. And it was after I started studying and learning about texting while driving, reading the studies, I realized just how dangerous this is. You know, if the average text takes your eye off the road for 4 seconds, at 60 miles an hour, that's 360 feet. That's more than a football field. You're not looking at the road, right? And again, all you gotta do is look around and you can see people have these things in their hands. And I think the other thing is about our law today is it's completely unenforceable. Right now, today, if you ask any judge or any police officer, when was the last time you convicted somebody for texting while driving? They'll say, I don't write those tickets anymore, because the only time you can convict somebody is if they confess. Right now, the law says you can enter, it's illegal to enter text or numbers into your phone. The problem is when you look over and see somebody with that phone in your hand, you don't know what they're doing. And if somebody says, I wasn't texting, I was playing Angry Birds, then they're innocent. And that's crazy to me. 12 other states have done it. Last year, traffic fatalities were up in the United States for the first time in 50 years. And all the experts that look at that data say it's because everybody's distracted from having these things in their hand. And we need to make a clear line so our police can enforce the law and so people will stop engaging in this dangerous behavior.
Is there technology available now in any of those other states you mentioned that can determine whether someone was actually texting at the time they were driving?
I don't think so. You know, as soon as you start going there, you start getting into a lot of serious privacy concerns. And, you know, I don't think a lot of people would like the government rooting around their phone, finding out what they're doing in their phone or what's in their phone. I don't think people are ready to give up that level of privacy yet. I'd have concerns about that myself. So I don't think so. And you know, the police I've talked to have said if the line was simply was the phone in your hand or not, it's a lot easier to enforce that. It's also actually more protective of people's civil liberties. Because right now the police can stop you if you're doing something legal with a phone in your hand. But as soon as the line is not in your hand, then it's clear when you get stopped and when you can't get stopped. It's a much clearer line.
Right. Another area you've been very active in over the last number of years is freedom of information. I know there's some legislation you have pending regarding universities in particular. Yeah.
I've always thought that transparency is a key, is very important to having good government. I think it was Justice Louis Brandeis back in the 1920s said that a street light is the best policeman and sunshine is the best disinfectant. And I think that's true when it comes to our government. The more information that we have out there, if people know when they're doing the people's business that they're on the record and all this stuff can be subject to FOIA, I think people make better decisions. And so I have a couple bills about FOIA. One says that whenever a government body goes into a closed session, because they're allowed to go into closed session to talk about legal matters or personnel matters, but they have to tell us ahead of time what they're going into session to discuss. And then when they come out, they have to take a vote that said, we only talked about the things we told you we were going to talk about. And I think what happens when they go into those closed sessions, they talk about all kinds of stuff. And so, but the problem is there's no consequence. So my bill says that if somebody votes to certify a closed meeting, and it was an improper certification, they talked about stuff in that closed meeting that was outside what they told everybody they were going to talk about, that the court can impose sanctions on that person. It has to be paid by them individually, not the government, but by them individually. So I hope people will think twice about what they do in those meetings and voting to certify those meetings properly. And there was a lot of concern about what happened at UVA in the meeting they had, where they decided to create this $2.1 billion strategic reserve fund, and how much notice the public was given about that. I mean, that sort of brought my attention to it. But there's a lot of local government people who have told me, when those doors shut,
sure,
a lot of things get talked about. So it's not just an issue there at UVA, it's an issue in other places. But I also have a bill that says that no university is allowed to vote on tuition increase without giving the public 30 days and the students 30 days notice, an explanation of why the tuition increase is necessary, and allowing a meeting where public comment can be given as to whether or not that tuition increase ought to happen. Right now they just announced, and everybody just finds out they had a 5% tuition increase without any opportunity to say anything about it. I don't think that's right. Tuitions have been out of control.
What would that notice requirement entail? For example, just on their website, for example?
Actually, my bill right now, as it's written, says they have to send an email to all the students,
okay,
and they have to put something on their website. But that's what it says right now. I mean, just every college student has email, I think. So
sure.
I would hope that's sufficient.
What about the issuance of driver's licenses for all residents of the state of Virginia?
Right. Yeah, I actually had that bill last year too. I call it licencias para todos, so licenses for everybody. But the 36th Senate District is about 23%, 25% Latino, and the number one issue in the Latino community right now is the issue of driver's licenses. And you can't live without a driver's license in Northern Virginia. I mean, you can live in Arlington without one if you live on the metro, but you can't take your kid to the doctor. You can't get to a job. You can't buy food. I mean, it's hard if not impossible to live. And so my bill basically would say that if you can show that you've paid taxes in Virginia and you pass a driving test, then you get a driver's license. You have to pay a fee. You can get a 1-year driving permit. We call it a permit, not a license in Virginia. It would have special words on top, making it clear it's not for federal use. That's the language that's required by the Real ID Act. But this has been done in 11 states now, including D.C. and Maryland. And in the states where it's happened, hit-and-run accidents go way down because people will stop. People will stop when there's an accident instead of being scared and running. There are actually fewer accidents because people actually learn the rules of the road and they study the tests, and they study the driving test, they learn the rules. You get people that will interact with the police more for things like domestic violence. They're not as much in fear because they can't prove identity issues. The most exciting thing to me, though, is that if we could get 300,000 or 400,000 new people to file income taxes, and if the average person claimed they made $35,000 a year, that would generate $500 million.
$500 million. That'd wipe away half of the current deficit.
Yeah, it more than half of the deficit. Plus, if you buy an auto insurance policy, we pay an auto insurance premium tax. That'd be another $100 million. I mean, we could take care of almost this entire budget deficit by incentivizing everybody to file their taxes in Virginia right now instead of having this underground economy where people are paid cash. The DMV studied the issue. They did a big study on it with all the stakeholders, and they validated it and said it was a good idea and that it would have a lot of positive benefits and very few negative impacts.
Of course, you're going to get resistance, I assume.
Sure. I mean, our president-elect has made the immigration issue a centerpiece of his campaign, and there's some people that are upset about it. And but from my perspective, we can't wait around for the federal government to solve this problem. We've been waiting around for the federal government to solve immigration now for 10 or 15 years, and I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard that Speaker Ryan and the president-elect even disagree about this issue, so I'm not really clear where it's going at the federal level. And we can't keep these other people in limbo in Virginia. They're part of the Virginia workforce. These are people that live here.
Sure.
They have children who are citizens. I think we need to just facilitate them to be able to live their lives and let the federal thing play itself out.
We see a lot of advertisements now on TV for not only payday loans, but car title loans, but a lot of them are starting to propagate the internet now.
Yeah.
And I think you have some legislation dealing with that as well.
Yeah, I had 2 bills this year. Last year I think I had 3 or 5, and there was some deal that was cut that actually accomplished my legislation last year. Or we think it did. We're not entirely sure yet. We're still trying to see how that plays out. But this year, I put in 2 bills. The Route 1 corridor has 21 car title lenders. I had 20 now, one shut down. But when I ran for office a year ago, it was 21 between Woodrow Wilson Bridge and like northern Stafford.
Are there that many McDonald's in that same area?
No, no, there's not many McDonald's there. I think there might be that many 7-Elevens, but there's not that many McDonald's. But you go a stretch of road and you would see like 3 within a mile in some places. But car title lenders are by statute allowed to lend money at up to 267% interest.
Repeat that.
By statute, they are allowed to lend money at up to 267% interest. Now, this other problem that's popped up is that there are these other lenders that lend money over the internet. And we've seen them lend money at 400, 600, even 5,000% interest.
Wow.
When you look at the way they structure their loans. Like when you start requiring somebody to pay a $100 fee every loan and they do it 12 months in a row and it's a $300 loan or $500 loan, I mean, it adds up real quick. But there's these companies from India, there's Indian tribes, there's companies from other continents that are coming in here and lending money over the internet to Virginians at crazy interest rates, and they're completely unregulated. And so I put in a bill that said that nobody is allowed to make a loan to anybody in Virginia until they become licensed with the State Corporation Commission and subjected themselves to the same rules that these other companies have. And that actually passed the Commerce and Labor Committee yesterday, and it's going on to the floor of the Senate, probably voted on Thursday or Friday. And then it goes to the House. So that bill passed, and it had bipartisan support. I think it was an 8-4 vote out of the Commerce and Labor Committee, and there's only 4 Democrats on the committee. So I'm hopeful that we might actually get some movement on that.
Great. We got less than a minute left. What about redistricting, independent commission?
I've always supported nonpartisan redistricting. Anybody that looks at the map of the 36th district will know it's crazy. Actually, you have to have a boat to stay in my district for part of it. I'm going through Prince William County. You can't do my district all by car, but we got to do nonpartisan redistricting. I mean, if there's one thing that I could fix to make our government work better, it would be redistricting and to let people draw the districts for us instead of let us pick our voters.
Great.
And I've never got to pick my voters, so I'm not saying
Great.
I've never been in that position, but we need
Great.
to fix that.
Great. Well, thank you for being here,
Yeah.
Senator Scott Surovell.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Woody.
Thanks for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.